the fact that no one understands how to make a pencil as an individual, fascinating insights like how trade actually works, in that we're no longer small tribes with 100 people in. And I found Lynn Alden's book, Broken Money, incredibly insightful for such an early stage. Like, that was credit. So credit has existed forever and will probably continue to do so. If anyone tells you that debt's not going to exist, I don't necessarily agree with that as a result of thinking about that specific scenario. Prices help dictate behavior in a marketplace, and prices are used with different types of money. And this is one of the awesome things about thinking about the history of money, and it pulls it all into like perspective. You're like, oh, we've tried all these different things, and Bitcoin's just another iteration of this process. But when it comes to the pencil, like, how important is it that the money you're using is functioning correctly to actually create something like a pencil?
Yeah, it's absolutely important to have a money, to have a medium of exchange, right? That to coordinate all of these things, because without trade, you don't have prices, right? And prices, specifically denominated in money, are extremely useful because value is subjective, right? And value is ordinal, meaning you can't really put a number on it. You cannot say that I like the banana 10 times more than the apple, for example. That's not how value works. You can say I prefer a banana to an apple, but that doesn't really help you with the question of how many bananas or apples should we produce, right? So because of private property, we can exchange the ownership title to a good. And with this exchange, we all of a sudden introduce a comparative value, right? Like for how many apples do you trade one banana, so to say. And then with the creation of more and more exchange, eventually we will find a more saleable good, a more marketable good, and that is money, right? And if we have a good that anyone is willing to trade for, then all of a sudden we have a money that we can impress prices in, because what's the quantity of that money good that people are selling their stuff for? And this allows us to do calculation, right? Meaning of which resources should be used for what. Should we use wood, steel, or gold to build our house? Right? All three of them are possible options, but the three of them have a different supply and demand, and therefore different prices, and therefore different rationale. Maybe it's not the best use of gold to build, a 1 meter thick wall,
Castle.
so to say. That's a lot of gold, and we don't have that much of it. So maybe we should use something else for producing this, right? And wood is quite abundant, but it's not as long lasting, and after a couple of years you might have to swap things out. So maybe steel is the correct option, right? But to really get to the question of where do we allocate our scarce resources, that's an extremely crucial point, because resources are scarce, meaning once we have allocated them to something, we cannot go back, right? There is no double spending of resources, so to say. Once you transform a bar of steel into an engine, right, you cannot easily get back because the engine is extremely complex. And plus, it took you a lot of time and effort and machinery and other resources to get to that point. And that means in our production stages, we increase the sophistication, so to say, of our resources into more and more narrow things, right? A bar of steel can be applied to millions of different actions, so to say, or products, but an engine block only to very few. So we can do less things with an engine block, but the things that we can do are, of course, much greater than what we could with a bar of steel. A bar of steel will never move you from place A to B, but an engine could potentially, right? So by increasing the roundaboutness of our production stages, we get to more useful goods ultimately. But there is a step too far, right? What if we consume so many resources in the production of specific deeper production stage products that ultimately we run out, right? And then we cannot finish producing the car because we're missing, I don't know, rubber for the gaskets or something like this. And these very complex products that we're enjoying nowadays rely on the correct application of scarce resources through time and space. not just for one good, but for a gazillion of different types of goods that we produce nowadays. So this is an utterly incredibly complex phenomenon. Like the modern market economy is a miracle. And it is based on property rights and on trade and on money, right? And if we start messing with the money, then we mess with the entire market structure. And if someone can print money at very cheap cost, then he's going to spend it on more frivolous things, right? On things that are not really fitting to the actual demand that he has. If it's easy for you to get money, you spend it on stuff that you might not even really need that much. Versus if you actually have to work, then your demand is going to be much more realistic to what you can afford. And so increasing the money supply ultimately means that we mess with the demand structure of the market. And so we consume more resources than we otherwise would have, and we invest more resources than we otherwise would have, which means we're lowering the resource count on both ends, right? We're consuming and we're specifying the resources into more narrowly scoped production. And if that happens on a large economic scale, then at first we think we're all rich and look, everyone's building new houses made out of gold. That's fantastic, right? That's the boom period, economically speaking. But sooner or later you realize that, well, we've literally consumed all of the resources. There is no more steel to finish the engine. There is no more wood to finish the construction of the house. And that's not just a thing that one entrepreneur did wrong or miscalculated. It's a strategic problem for the entire economy. And that's the bust, ultimately, when we realize that at large, as a society, we've overconsumed and we've malinvested our resources into stuff that we don't actually need. And therefore, even the things that we do need, right, like shelter, like food, for those valuable, critical things, we don't have the resources anymore to fix them or to finish them. And that's the death of society. And I think to a large part, it starts with the abolition of private property, which in a more specific analysis is the inflation of the money supply. And that is the root of all evil.
What an awesome explanation. Thank you, Max. It's a big day when you realize that money is 50% of every transaction. You're like, what the hell is this thing? Even the phrase, the most saleable good, was like, oh, money's actually a thing. I don't know, it sounds really stupid, but like you hadn't even really ever thought about what is money, and hence it's such an important question to ask. That's, the reason we're even on this call, for example. So what in your mind are good examples of the misallocation of resources as a result of fucking around with the money supply that you see going on around you? And I think it was Parker Lewis I heard once talking about, like, you mentioned the word miracle. Walk into a grocery store anywhere and just think about how much human interaction and trade has been required to get every single one of those items on the shelves in that shop. And then consider what it means if every single one of those decisions that were made economically to bring an idea to physical form in a marketplace was using the wrong measuring stick. And it's kind of like, whoa, you just, like, half this stuff probably wouldn't even be here. But like, anyway, that's a bit of context for you to run with.
Yeah, one of my favorite, very mundane daily examples of the fuck up that fiat brought us is dishwasher taps, right? You have what do you need to help a dishwasher clean stuff better? Just need soap, right? And you can produce this very easily in a powder form with like 3 basic ingredients. It's baking soda, some citric acid, and 1 or 2 other powder ingredients. And all of a sudden you have a powder that you can put the majority of a spoon you put into that little basket, that holds the soap. But you would also like to add some soap to the pre-wash, right? Because first it runs the washer and cleans the worst of it and cleans better with soap, right? So you don't need that much soap in the pre-wash because it's only going to run for a short time. So you just put a little bit of the spoon in the general vicinity of the dishwasher, right? That's how the dishwashers were designed. You have 2 runs of cleaning, so you need 2 batches of soap. Very easy to do if you just have a spoon and powder, right? Very simple. You can do it at home, Nothing fancy. It will take you 5 minutes to produce
Don't
a
worry about
month
trying
worth
this at
of.
home, guys. Yeah.
No, I mean, do actually like make your own
Yeah.
dishwasher soap. Like it's super simple. And and what do we have nowadays on the market? We have these fancy like packs of this weird kind of plasticky gel
Mm.
that has like 5 different chambers. Maybe with some powder in the back of it, but then there's a red liquid and a blue liquid and a green liquid, right? So all different types of soap. And we now need to produce not only this weird gel that dissolves in water, not just the actual washing powder, but also the different liquids with God knows what exactly is in them, right? And the coloring for all of this and the machinery to put it together in this form factor, right? Plus, we need to deliver it to the store in a nice packaging and so on. And maybe there's even a plastic wrapper around each of them. So we have now a production stage that all of a sudden involves thousands of people, right? Like researchers, scientists, manufacturer, producers. We need to produce the machines. So all of a sudden we need to get the ore, to get the steel, right? And produce a bunch of electricity and pay for the coffee of all of the workers, etc. So we've increased the roundaboutness of something as simple as dishwasher soap, right? It cost us so much more to produce it. And the product is worse, right? Because now everyone just takes this one tab and puts it into the little basket. And that's it, right? Nobody puts two of these things and one extra into the pre-wash because, well, they're expensive, right? Why would you waste one in the pre-wash? So nobody's putting soap in the pre-wash anymore. So that means that the dishwasher doesn't work anymore because it doesn't clean without soap. And now all of a sudden we have to increase the intensity of the soapness of the main wash because it didn't clean in the pre-wash. And now you have to go back and re-engineer everything to have a much stronger washing detergent in these little packs. Right? So something as simple as dishwasher soap that you can produce in 5 minutes by yourself at home, right, all of a sudden requires numerous factories and numerous energy producers and numerous researchers and scientists to ultimately give you a worse product. And that is the increased roundaboutness of a fiat economy.